This is Josh. He has been working in the cybersecurity industry for a very long time, focusing on vulnerability management, cybersecurity operation, meaning the technical aspect of detecting and responding to cybersecurity incidents. Whereas recently, I have been focused on the non-technical aspect of cybersecurity, which is GRC. Together, we will share with you the secrets of how to actually land your first cybersecurity job. Not only that, but we will also share with you the biggest mistakes that beginners make when they're trying to land their first cybersecurity job. And if you stick till the end, Josh and I will share with you what we would do differently if we could go back in time to restart our career in cybersecurity. Starting with the first question, Josh, can you tell me what is the biggest mistake that candidates do when they're trying to land their first cybersecurity job?
The biggest mistake that brand new people make when starting their career in cybersecurity, what I've noticed is generally like a lack of, not only a lack of focus, but like a lack of direction as well. They don't really know what to do. There's certain things that you have to do, and when it comes to like getting a job, but they don't really know what those things are. So they tend to do like a little bit of a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And that lack of direction and lack of focus like really stretches the time out that it takes to like break into the field. It doesn't need to take years. You can like stretch years down to like just a few months if you focus on the right things and you have like proper direction. So lack of direction and lack of focus.
Yeah, look, really solid point. Recently, I noticed that the biggest mistake that candidates make when they're trying to land their first cybersecurity job is that they spend so much time doing theoretical stuff. So I'll get candidates who will show me their resume and they've spent the last 2 years getting a master's degree in cybersecurity and doing all of these highly theoretical certificates and trainings whilst neglecting the practical aspects. So they don't take the time to do practical projects or hands-on certification with a lab component. The way I see cybersecurity is learning cybersecurity is like learning how to swim. You can't just learn how to swim from a book. You need to actually go in the water. You need to get your hands dirty. So this is, in my opinion, the biggest mistake that candidates make when they're trying to land their first cybersecurity job.
Yeah, I agree with this fully. Do you think people need to work in IT before they transition into cybersecurity, or can people just go straight into cybersecurity? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, honestly, that's a really good question. And this is one of the common myths that just refuses to die, especially when you go to places like Reddit, which is probably a terrible place for cybersecurity advice. Now, in the past, when I was starting out, and possibly when you were starting out, Josh, the common advice was that you start as a network engineer, or perhaps you work in help desk or in system administration, and then you quote unquote progress into cybersecurity. Now things have changed since then. Because in the past, when I was starting out, there was simply no jobs with the title cybersecurity. So we were network engineers or IT engineers, and security was part of their jobs. However, today you can start with cybersecurity as your first job, even if you come from a non-technical background. So you can land your first cybersecurity job without having a degree or without having an IT experience. Some cybersecurity jobs require no IT experience. For example, GRC, which is non-technical, you don't really need to know how to configure a firewall. You need to know what a firewall does. You don't need years of experience being a firewall engineer. That's one example. Another example, which is something you, Josh, work with, which is vulnerability management. Do you think like doing vulnerability management require you to have 5 years of IT experience?
Yeah, no. There's like a lot of different roles in vulnerability management, and for sure, not all of them require like any experience in IT.
And I think the oxymoron with that is what people fail to understand is that, let's say the job that I'm recruiting for is a vulnerability management analyst. That is a junior level job that doesn't pay a lot. So I cannot hire someone with 10 years of IT experience. First, I can't pay them enough. And second, they will simply get bored of doing that job. Therefore, what I want people to understand is that there are entry-level cybersecurity jobs that don't require IT experience. However, that doesn't mean that there are no jobs that require years of experience. I think a massive mistake that I see candidates make is that they come to me and they say, I cannot believe it. Some jobs require you to have degrees and certs and experience. I'm like, yes, those jobs are not for you. The company is allowed to require experienced candidate for some roles, but that's not every role, which is again, I think another mistake that people make is that they want to be the ultimate candidate. They want to qualify for all the jobs in all the companies and be like this Superman that will never get rejected. And I think that's just a myth.
Yeah, it is. I have this theory I talk about on my channel a lot. Even if you're like absolutely perfect candidate, there's a bunch of stuff, invisible stuff that you can't see that will prevent you from getting a job. Like any job that you apply to, like the job could actually be fake, or they already hired somebody, or they have somebody in mind and they're not going to like tell you that. Maybe they have to go through like the hoops of like submitting the application and all this stuff for like HR or something like this. There's like a lot of stuff that you don't know. So even if you're absolutely perfect, you have like 20% chance of getting any given job.
And frankly speaking, you don't need to qualify for every job under the sun. You just need one. You need one job to get your foot in the door. And speaking of channels, by the way, in case you're not aware, Josh is a massive cybersecurity YouTuber. His channel is Josh Madako. I'll leave a link to it in the description box, but please subscribe to him and to my channel, Unix Guy, if you haven't already. Which actually brings me to a really important question that I get asked all the time. Josh, can you tell me honestly, is cybersecurity hard?
So like actually practicing cybersecurity itself it's not really hard. Especially compared to some actual physical hard labor things and other like knowledge jobs, like being a doctor or something. I always compare it with like medicine, where I'm like, oh, at least I'm not working in the ER or something like this. I always use this analogy. And once you understand, like, to be honest, like the basics of risk and how cybersecurity works and how it augments business and like what the actual like role of it is, and you understand enough stuff, it's really easy to just like go in and, be effective in like a lot of different environments. So I don't think cybersecurity is hard once you, reach a certain like critical mass of knowledge. It's not really hard. You just have to like ramp up your learning and experience, and that's not that hard to do compared to like some other stuff.
And like spot on, you took the words out of my mouth. I think the problem that I see is there are so many people who are new to cybersecurity. They just got their first job and they go on the internet and tell you how really hard and challenging their job is. And every time I see a video like this, I feel like I want to slap the person who posts these videos telling us the job is hard. Because honestly, it's actually offensive for people who do a hard job. You brought up some example, and I'll add to it is, for example, nursing. Nurses are probably the most hardworking individuals out there, and probably the most underpaid individuals out there. If you compare a day in the life of a nurse to a day in the life of a cybersecurity professional, you'll think the cybersecurity professional doesn't do any work. Now, having said that, I'm not saying that there is no level of difficulty in the job. It's still a job. You need to work hard. You need to study. But if put in the context of jobs like Josh said, like physical labor job or job with higher stakes like a doctor or a nurse, cybersecurity is definitely a cushy job. It's an easy job. You get with a lot of progress opportunities as well. So in my opinion, it's a cushy job, but it's not what people make it out to be on the internet.
Yeah. And I will say that for me, the actual difficult part of cybersecurity is the human component. Especially depending on where you're working. Like if you're working in some kind of role where you have to modify human behavior, like governance, like GRC in general, it can be really difficult because human is like really dynamic and a lot of different personalities, and people are stubborn and they're like, what is the word? Possessive over their assets or whatever.
Little corner. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's really frustrating. It can be really frustrating. Like the act of like understanding risk and like doing all this stuff is quite easy after you get an idea and get used to it. But then you have to prepare yourself to like deal with the people, the humans, right? Yeah, it's like
100%. Like GRC is very much a people skills type of job. And I worked as a receptionist in a gym long time ago when I was studying to become a cybersecurity professional. And you're spot on. The difficulty that I find in GRC is mainly middle-aged men with massive egos because they seem to want to know everything and object to everything. But again, like I said, if I compare my day to even someone who works in a cafe, the person who works as a barista in a cafe, their job's a lot harder because the customers they deal with are a lot more difficult than mine. But again, like, it's all perspective, I guess.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point because regardless of, this is semi-unrelated, but regardless of like where you work, you're gonna kind of have a hard time like anyway. Like if you're a nurse or a barista or like a doctor or like you're working at McDonald's or a cybersecurity professional. So in my opinion, it's good to like pick the hard thing that is like is as cushy as possible and makes more money, because it's better to like have a hard time as like, you know, working in GRC dealing with people versus having a hard time being like a barista, because you have to be really physical and like deal with a lot of stuff, but your pay is like, you know, a quarter of like a cyber person. So it's like
and to be fair, like what's hard for someone could be easy for someone else. I personally am a very social person, so I enjoy talking to different stakeholders. I work in consulting, so I get to see different organizations solve different problems. For me, this gives me energy. Someone else who, for example, doesn't like to deal with people, cybersecurity is a broad umbrella. Like Josh, you specialize in like the security operation aspect of it. Do you feel like you need to talk to a lot of people when you do that type of job?
It depends. So like the last major corporate job I did was as a vulnerability management program manager. And I'm a program manager, so I have to make people do stuff, but I'm not in charge of them. So I have to do it through rapport and bribery and like, you know, so yeah, it's like, it's hard. There's people.
But if you're in a because one of the, before GRC, I led an incident response team where we call it DFIR, so digital forensic and incident response. But mainly our job was in a security operations center dealing with alerts. I didn't really have to talk to a lot of people. Really, most days, just respond to the incident, I do my analysis, and I close the ticket. So that was a typical day in the life where I didn't necessarily need to talk to people.
Yeah, these ones like fun. And I don't want to say easy, but it's like easier than dealing with a bunch of humans.
For me, I got bored of doing that, and I chased the job that gets me to deal with humans. But again, cybersecurity is not one thing. It's really broad, and there is something for everyone.
Yeah, that's a good point. I could go on like more tangents about this. Like people, it reminds me when you say like cybersecurity is a broad umbrella. It really is, because there's people on Reddit all the time who are like you need to learn like Linux and Python and like all this stuff. But is the auditor like walking around like typing Python like everywhere and like logging into like Red Hat? That, you know, it depends on like what you're doing. There's too many domains in cybersecurity to say like you need like one thing or another.
Unfortunately, look, Reddit as a platform is great. It has a lot of users, and I go on Reddit, but not in the cybersecurity subreddit. Unfortunately, I did find the cybersecurity subreddit to be mainly populated with individuals who clearly do not work in this field. It's mainly individuals who want to get into cybersecurity, and it becomes a case of the blind leading the blind. So one person will read something online about what cybersecurity is, and then they go on Reddit to teach people what that is, and it becomes this a never-ending cycle of nonsense. However, the good news is I think the real-world cybersecurity is a lot better than what Reddit think it is.
Reddit is like a hive mind, anyways. It's
an echo chamber.
Yes. Oh my God. So speaking of specialization, do you think you need to specialize early on in your career, or what are your thoughts?
That's actually a really good question, because when I was the reason why I wanted to get into cybersecurity, because I wanted to learn hacking. I was like obsessed with hacking. Hacking is the thing, and we all I think got one way or another, because we want to get into hacking, and then we're like, oh well, you can get a job as a hacker. So we chase cybersecurity. My personal view on this is that if you're trying to land your first cybersecurity job, you should aim to maximize your chances of landing that job. Now, the way to do that is to cast a wide net, meaning you need to qualify for the maximum number of jobs. So the approach that I advocate for, it's not the only approach, there's many avenues, but the ones that I personally advocate for, that I found that led to the most success stories of individuals landing their first cybersecurity job, is to have a generalist approach, meaning you start by learning, doing something like, let's say, the Google Cybersecurity Cert or whatever, something that introduces you to the definitions of cybersecurity, and then try to be a generalist. Learn everything, like learn vulnerability management, learn GRC, learn SOC analyst skills, because this will open the doors for you to work somewhere like a small to medium-sized organizations. Those organizations, they don't have specialists, they can't afford to. So they want you to know a little bit of everything, And once you land that first job, then the sky's the limit. You can learn whatever you want. You can learn penetration testing, you can learn forensics, learn whatever your heart desire, and you can specialize later. But in the beginning, don't be attached to any specialization. Learn as much as you can, be as broad as you can. And once you learn that first job, then, learn whatever you want. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I agree with this because I tend to think about things in a really structured way. So why I'm not like shilling Google cybersecurity cert. It's just like a good foundational cert because like regardless of whatever job you do in cybersecurity, you have to understand like organizational risk and the reduction of risk and the CIA triad because like every position in cybersecurity is revolves around supporting the CIA triad in one way or another. That's like confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So it's good to have like those nice foundation. And then for me personally, again, this is like my opinion. I recommend after you getting a nice foundation, maybe go like semi-deep in like 2 areas. So in my opinion, I would go kind of deep-ish in like governance, risk, and compliance, because that will really give you a lot of context about like organizational risk, and it will teach you about many like different frameworks and like how they come into play and like how to use them and everything. And then as well as GRC, like some security operations, because that's kind of like what everyone thinks of when they think about cybersecurity.
Meaning detecting and responding to stopping hackers basically from hacking to an organization.
So like I tell like a really, this is a bit technical, but I always like I'm going to shrink this down a lot, what I'm about to say. So like once you have like a decent foundation, I always tell people to like learn like risk, like for example, NIST 837, which is a risk management framework, and then NIST 861, which is a computer incident response, like life cycle, like how to properly respond to incidents. Because like once you get into an interview, like you will likely be asked like some dynamic question that maybe you don't understand the answer to. But if you understand like how to manage risk and you understand how to respond to incidents, you can pretty much answer most questions, because they might ask you like a technical question like a phishing email, like somebody clicks a link, like what do you do? But if you've never done that before, you can still answer in the framework of like in the lens of like NIST 861, where you formulate your answer in like detecting it and then verifying the thing actually happened, and then working to like contain it and then eradicate and the recovery, and then do that post incident thing. You can frame your answer in that thing and it matches NIST 861. They'll be like, oh wow. And like same thing if they ask you like a soft governance type question, like you were just appointed as the senior analyst at the XYZ corporation and they're implementing a security program, like what do? You can always like answer in the framework of like the risk management framework, where you want to like identify critical assets and then get an idea of where you stand in terms of like I'm doing a lot of jargon, but where the organization stands in terms of like the cybersecurity framework, like where there's gaps, and then you can think about where you need to be in terms of like the type of data that you store and process, and then you do a gap analysis, and you can answer in that framework even if you've like never done it before. So to circle back, like understanding risk and then understanding like incident response at like a decent level, you can answer a lot of questions.
100%. And honestly, Josh, like you kind of, this is exactly what I've been recommending on my channel. Like I've got a video titled "How I Would Learn Cybersecurity If I Was Starting Over," and like titled 6 Months Plan, which is essentially I start you with the Google Cybersecurity Cert because it teaches you what cybersecurity is with definitions, but then I get you to do those free Qualys trainings and then GRC Mastery, which will essentially teach you what Josh just alluded to, is really incident response framework, what is identity, what is asset management, all of this, and how to use it within NIST. But then I quickly move you into something like a security operations type training. That's a technical hands-on training, basically giving you blue teaming skills, right? So combining those, it will give you the highest chance of working on any organization. So it really makes you broad, because you're not a one-trick pony. Now compare that with someone who's going so deep into, let's say, forensics, or so deep into penetration testing. These individuals, very hardworking, but in the interview, when I ask them, I give them scenarios that are outside of that specialization, they fail to answer.
Yeah.
Therefore, I think specialization is not the best way to go in the beginning. Later on, please specialize. We all did it. Pick 1 or 2 areas and go as deep as you can. There is an abundance of hands-on practical training courses that will teach you all of that. Notice I said hands-on practical training. Compare that with someone who spent 2 years doing theoretical stuff, they're not going to know anything. However, if someone really followed the plans that Josh and I are giving you, you will actually have those skills and you will be able to answer questions in the interview.
Yes.
Now, Josh, speaking of interview mistakes, I want to take it a step even before the interview. Now, before landing an interview, the thing that will get you the interview is your resume or your CV. This is the thing. This is your first impression on the individual who's trying to hire you. So, Josh, can you tell me what's the biggest mistake that you see beginners make in their resume when they're trying to land their first cybersecurity job?
Gosh, there's a lot of stuff that comes to mind about this. The major thing, well, there's a lot, but just not even like necessarily cybersecurity related. The resume is like inconsistent in a lot of different ways, like inconsistent font, inconsistent formatting, inconsistent like verbiage in terms of like past tense and future tense. Those like basic things like grammar, you really need to like square all of those away as much as you can. And there's not really any excuse to have these level of like errors on your resume, because you use the free version of ChatGPT and like you fix all of those basic things like instantly. But beyond that, it's just maybe putting the wrong stuff on your resume or not having enough of the right stuff, if it makes sense. So for example, I have like a basic, another thing is like over complicating your resume, because you need to make your resume appeal to both the ATS and be easily readable by humans as well. And people don't think about that. They think about it like, oh, a human person is going to look at this only, and they'll have like some weird like formatting or something. But even if you put like a horizontal line on your resume, I've tested this, like, education, horizontal line, and like your school, the line will sometimes mess the ATS up and it will wipe out the whole section of your resume, and it's just like a waste. So you need to make it like as simple and straightforward as possible without any weird formatting on it. So you need to consider humans and ATS are both reading it, and then of course you want to have enough of the right stuff on it. So that's pretty much all in terms of mistakes. There's a lot of stuff that I think you should add, but in terms of mistakes, just these basic things: grammar, formatting. Remember an ATS is parsing it. Use ChatGPT, and then try to get some other eyes on it to like mitigate the mistakes. But what do you think in terms of mistakes?
Yeah, looks spot on. And if you actually want to avoid these mistakes, I put a free resume template on. Just go to unixguy.com/free. You can download that template. It's clean. I actually, as part of my job in PwC, I have to interview candidates because we're constantly trying to hire, trying to promote, and all of that. So some of the resumes I see are from internal candidates, some of them from external. I personally, I'm a very forgiving person who reviews resumes. So sometimes I'll see grammar mistake and stuff, and I'll say, you know what, could be a really good candidate who made a mistake. I'm forgiving, but some of my colleagues are not. So you have no reason to have these mistakes on. I think that's the common one that you mentioned. At the higher levels, like when I hire senior professionals, they don't seem to have these mistakes. So it seems to be mainly a beginner issue. I think that's issue number one. Issue number two that I see even from some really seasoned professionals is that they'll have a section, they call it skills. And like at the top, they'll say their name, blah, they have a section called skills. And in the skills, they list a bullet point that are too generic. For example, they have a bullet point that says Linux, incident response, Splunk, right? So these are 3 things. Now, this doesn't actually tell me much. What I advocate for is, and again, there's no right or wrong answer. That's the approach I recommend, which is instead of having a section called skills, I want you under experience, or if you have a project, instead of telling me you have a skill called Splunk, this doesn't tell me what do you know about Splunk or how much Linux do you know. Instead, I want you to tell me, let's have a section called projects, and underneath that you say configured a SIEM called Splunk, or created detection use cases use Splunk. So give me one line that tells me what you did with that tool. If you say Linux, instead of telling me I know Linux, tell me configured user access management on Linux or did patch management on Linux. So tell me something. And when you tell me that, the keyword is already there. I saw the keyword Linux, but I also know what you did with it. So again, that's a really, really common one. Let's say the job wants you to know Splunk, and I see your resume tells me Splunk, and then I get you in the interview and you tell me, oh no, all I did is some really basic stuff. Well, we need someone with experience. So be specific on what you know and avoid just putting random bullet points.
Yeah, it's good to quantify. I guess another, lack of quantification or lack of substance, I guess, to your claims. So this is also kind of a tangent, but a lot of the time these days, like people will interview you based off of your resume. If it's government, they usually have like set questions they have to ask.
Criteria, yeah. We have them in Australia as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Josh is from the US, I'm from Australia, but this seems to be a common practice.
Yeah, but like a private company or like company who can like do whatever they want, they often will like interview you based off your resume. And if they ask you something that's like on your resume and you can't like really talk to it, it's just like embarrassing, it's not good.
It's also dishonest. Honestly, if you put something in your resume, you better be able to back it up. You tell me you know Linux, I expect you to know Linux. Yeah. And if you don't know, and if you don't answer that question, just tell me that you've lied on your resume. and therefore, I cannot trust you. Cybersecurity is based on trust. I cannot trust you to do your job. It's a big no in my book. So it's only put the stuff that you know.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and funny thing about quantification, Josh and I had a long chat earlier before this video, and I just realized that we're completely different people. He is a very numbers-driven quantification individual. I'm the opposite. I'm all about what's the word you used?
Qualitative.
Yeah, I'm very qualitative. I go by feel and intuition, while Josh is very numbers-driven. And I think we need both, and we need both in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And consequently, Josh ended up in a very technical type role, whereas I ended up in the people-driven role. But you need both, and there is spot for everyone.
Yeah, my last role was people role. I didn't like it.
You didn't like it, yeah?
No, it was bad.
I'm the opposite. I'm having a ball. Like, I'm loving it.
Yeah. So why do you think beginners actually fail or struggle to land their first job in cybersecurity?
Yeah, I mean, where do I even start? I think number one, they don't watch my videos. They don't follow the advice in the videos, in my videos or in Josh's videos. I think it's a case of really not understanding the advice. So point number one that I see, I think we alluded to it in the beginning, is spending way too much time on theoretical stuff. I lost count of individuals who give me their CVs and they have all these, I'm not going to mention names, but all of these highly theoretical certs that teach them nothing, and then they are surprised that they can't land the job. And even when they land interviews, they don't get their job. Now, we've talked about that. The real ticker is fear of rejection. I'll meet a candidate and they're like, I applied to jobs and I don't know, what does it take to land a cybersecurity? I'm like, what happened? He's like, I got rejected from 2 jobs. I'm like, okay, and I get rejected from even more than 2 jobs. If I apply to jobs today, I will still get rejected. It's just part of the process.
Yeah.
There is a finite number of jobs. You need to play the numbers game. And I always give that example. Imagine you have 2 individuals. One applied to 3 jobs and another one applied to 50 jobs. Which one have, and assuming all else being equal, which one have a higher chance of landing an interview and landing a job? The person who applied to more jobs. Now, people sometimes take this and they ignore everything else I say. I'm saying this as part of a structured plan where you are constantly working on your practical skills that I personally recommend. Again, I saw a candidate the other day on LinkedIn. He kept on adding these quote-unquote practical projects that he made up that honestly are pointless. It's just random 10 or 20 projects that are pointless. Again, follow projects that actually reflect what the industry is after. Keep doing that.
Yes.
Keep adding it to your resume. Apply to jobs, and then there's no reason why you can't get to your goal. But the mistake that individuals make, they'll do a couple of theoretical certs, maybe even 1 practical cert, apply to 10 jobs, get rejected once, get discouraged. I'm like, all right, cybersecurity is not for me. And that is a problem. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I agree. It really requires a lot of work, especially cybersecurity. So going back to like where we were talking about, do you need to work in IT first? Basically, cybersecurity, like the learning. Okay, so the learning curve to get into IT is like let's say it's like 50 points. The learning curve to get into cybersecurity is maybe like 75 or 100 points. So this is a really random thing to say, but just understand, like, you know, it
takes a bit more work.
It's kind of more, yeah. And people don't understand this. They don't understand it's like a decent amount of work, right? If you imagine, I kind of have this like roadmap I tell my audience to use to get into cybersecurity, like these checklists. If you like if you do each item at like a, you know, S tier level, if you do all of them, and then the last item is like a really high quality applications with a really high quality resume, like 5 per day. For example, you have a objectively really squared away resume, and it's just like a good resume, and you do like a good application, and you do like, you know, a warm reach out on LinkedIn, and then you try to apply directly to the site, and you do, you know, 5 of these per day or something. And this is after you've like conquered the learning curve of like all this stuff and doing all those projects. If you do 5 of those per day, and after like 100 days, that's like 500 high quality applications that you've applied to, like 500 decent jobs. Eventually you're going to get something, but even getting to the point to have a good resume, to like have stuff on your resume that makes it a good resume, it takes like a decent amount of like time and work, but people don't like really realize that, I guess. And
as it should.
Yeah, yes.
As it should. If I was to want to become a nurse, I will need to go to university, spend 3 years studying, passing those really difficult biology exams and nursing exams, and then I need to do a certain number of hours to qualify to be a nurse. That's a lot of time and effort. But to get into cybersecurity, it doesn't need that much.
Yeah.
I just don't know why people expect it to be straightforward.
Yeah.
It's frustrating.
If you do the stuff, it will happen eventually. And this is like a really good way to think about it. So imagine like imagine you apply to any given job you apply to, there's like a 1% chance of getting an interview, right? Just assume for the sake of argument. If you apply to, this is an extreme example, even if you have a 1% chance, if you apply to like 1,000 jobs, you're statistically likely to get several interviews. And an easier way to think about this is if you flip a quarter like once, like what is the chance you get like heads 10 times in a row? It's like, it's almost impossible to happen, right? It's almost impossible. So the likelihood, assuming your resume and everything is good, if you apply to like 500 jobs, the likelihood that every single one of those will be a rejection, it's really low chance of happening. It's really low chance. And again, like people need to put in the work to have good stuff to put on their resume, and they have to have a decent resume as well. Because like even if you have like a half-assed resume, it could be the difference between having to apply to like 1,000 jobs versus 50 jobs if you put effort into your resume and like the application and everything. People, I don't want to say they're lazy, but they just don't understand the effort that's required. And the effort that's required it's not like inhuman. You just have to like understand and do it anyway.
And honestly, if you're watching this video and if you do half of what Josh just said, chances are you will land your job even before that. There are, like I said, if you've been on Josh's channel or my channel, I personally get daily success stories from individuals who have landed the jobs after they've done the work. It's possible, it's out there, and again, if you're watching this video, you are probably on the right track. It does take work, but it's definitely possible. Now, speaking of regular comments that I get on my channel, a really common question that I get is that, can you get a remote cybersecurity job that you can do from your bedroom in a foreign country?
Yeah, so, well, to answer, well, yeah, it's possible to do. It's possible, but it's just like really difficult, especially if you're wanting to work in the US, because the US can be like really picky for their talent or whatever. So if you want to get like this kind of job, you pretty much anything will happen, right? You can get hired into the Navy, in the US Navy as a Somalian, right? It's possible if you have what they need, right? They will fast track a clearance for you and they'll hire you. But in order for that to happen, you have to be like a really crazy level, like
exceptional. You need to be 1 in a million.
Yeah, you need to be like really good. Like it's possible, but you need to like really be special and really distinguish yourself from your peers, like even more than in your own country. Like you have to be like really high, like in your own country to be like, picked up by like
Chosen.
another country, right? It's possible, but it's like, I don't want to say it's like, well, it's kind of unlikely. You have to get really good, right? But essentially, yeah.
Yeah, and look, this question, I mean, I understand where it's coming from. It's someone's trying to learn, and some individuals, they tell me that they have a negative view of the city that they live in. Now, I totally understand that, and I'm also guilty of that sometimes myself. However, the person who's asking this question is usually someone who hasn't even started studying for cybersecurity, right? Like, it's not the right time or place to be asking these questions. First, make a start, study cybersecurity, see maybe do you even like this field? Like, spend 6 months learning, and then you can decide if this is something you even want to do. Now, your next step should be, in my view, is to get a local job. Wherever you live, try to get a local job. Even if it's not, quote unquote, perfect. Just get whatever you can get, build that experience. You want to be exceptional, you want to be highly talented, start building that talent. Start doing the hard yards, start doing these challenging intermediate level hands-on lab-based certification. Become an experienced candidate. And then, you know what, it can happen. One thing I see constantly is if you try to find a job in your country in a multinational organization. For example, if you get a job at Microsoft Office in your country, then I've seen individuals who were able to transfer from their country into, say, the US or Australia or whatever.
Yeah.
That's one avenue, right?
Yeah.
So it's possible, it can happen, but usually it's for experienced candidates. It's definitely not for someone who hasn't even begun the process of learning. I think it's the wrong question to ask.
Yeah, because what you want, especially for new people, like what you want is so far removed from where you're at now. You don't actually even know if you want that.
Yeah.
Because before I got into cybersecurity, I was like, oh, I want to be a CISO, but I got
CISO, just for the Chief Information Security Officer.
Yeah. And I worked really hard, and I got next to a CISO. Like, I was like the program manager, and I was directly under the CISO, and I was like, dang, I don't want to do that, because you just don't know until you get kind of close to it. So what I would recommend, like, if you're sitting in your room and you're like, I want to like work remote for like the Navy or whatever, I would just focus on like getting really good. Just get really good and get a local job, like you said, and just live, eat, and breathe like cybersecurity, and just work really hard and get as good as you can, and like progress as far as you can. And the better you are and the more stuff that you do, the more stuff you'll be able to do in the future. And if you really want to like really distinguish yourself from your peers, you have to do stuff that other people are not doing and have stuff that other people don't have. And, there's a lot of different ways you can do that, but just, you have to distinguish yourself from your peers, in one way or another. You have to do something that other people aren't doing and have something that they don't have. Because why would they hire like some random person in country Z, right? When there's like a lot of talent.
They also don't know you. They don't know you, while someone else who's local, they can interview, they can meet, they can trust. It's a hugely different game.
Yeah. You just have to be really good. Just, who cares? Don't think about like, I'm going to work in another country. Think about, I'm going to be the best possible person there is, and just conduct yourself in that way, and then things will like come to you. You'll have to like kind of find your way along, like you'll pivot a lot probably along the way, because you don't even know like what you don't know, and you don't know what you like anyways.
Exactly. Like when I started, I didn't even know what GRC was, and here we are. I thought I want to be a hacker, I want to be a pen tester, but now I can't imagine myself doing that. I'll get so bored. Funny you mentioned CISO, or we call it CISO. Funny you mentioned the job of a CISO and how everyone wants to be. A really common question I get from, again, individuals who haven't even started on the journey is, it's like, sir, can you give me a security architect roadmap? I think what happens is people go and they do a job search. They see the word security architect. They see the high salary. I'm like, oh, that's a job I want. And my usual answer for them is, work in cybersecurity for 10 years, then you'll figure it out. Because an architect is just an experienced cybersecurity professional who offers high-level cybersecurity advice. Again, it's a job I prefer. As part of consulting GRC, we offer architectural advice sometimes. It's not something I ever want to do full-time, because frankly speaking, I find it boring. But again, it's something, it's not ideal. It's not possible for beginners. It's something you do after you get an experience. Don't be blinded by fancy titles, fancy salaries. All of this will come after, as Josh said, after you establish yourself in the industry, after you become a really experienced and knowledgeable cybersecurity professional.
Yeah, and if you're someone who doesn't actually know the industry and you just want to make a lot of money, it can happen. All you have to do is just be as good as you can possibly be and just keep progressing, and you'll get opportunities that you didn't even think about would happen. Say you become like a security analyst, and then your next job is like a security engineer or something. It's possible people just start soliciting you for like security director or security manager for like some smaller company or something like that. It's easy if you're like it's a tangent, like security engineer, like a big company. It's kind of like easier to go from like engineer to like security manager, or even like CISO for like a smaller org, and then you have like a cool title. Just be like open to stuff and just try really hard and have a presence and do your best, and stuff will just like come to you eventually that you didn't even imagine, and then you can make the choice of which path you want to take along the way. So if you're good, stuff will just like come to you, right? It's just
100%.
So yeah, just do your best instead of being like, I want to be an architect or CISO. Just be, I just want to be the best I can be,
and everything will follow. Get good, and the money will follow. Get good, and these titles and fancy stuff that you're after, they will follow. Get busy doing the thing, and everything will follow as a byproduct of that.
Yes.
Which brings me to the most important part of this video. Josh, if you could go back in time, imagine as of today, you forgot everything, you know nothing about cybersecurity, and today you want to start your career in cybersecurity. What would you do differently?
If I didn't know anything, that's hard to answer, because like, what if I
like you forgot your cybersecurity knowledge and you're about to start a career? What would you do differently?
Okay.
Let's say Josh from the future is talking to Josh from the past. What advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, so I didn't know what to do, so I did a lot of stuff until I just like got a job somehow eventually. So one thing, I would narrow the scope of what I was doing, and I would do less certs, and I would focus on stuff that was like more important. So for example, I got like too many CompTIA certs. I got like 5, like A+ Network Plus, Security
Me
Plus,
too.
Server Plus, Project Plus.
I did Server Plus as well. It's embarrassing.
Yeah, you learning about different tape types and like stuff like this.
I have Storage Plus as well.
I didn't get that one. But yeah, you don't need like a ton of, you don't need like all that stuff. You just have to like learn like a nice core foundation of stuff, and then learn some more stuff on top of it, and get I'm generalizing a lot, but I guess people can ask in the comments, but say I would try to find an agreed upon really useful cybersecurity lab that covered maybe incident response, maybe identity, maybe something that's like really,
which honestly there is an abundance of nowadays.
Yeah,
it's really good. Yeah,
and I would get like a decent sized one that the industry cared about, and I would implement that lab like 20 times, to be honest, because the more time you do something, you get like more intuition and more intuition and more intuition, and then I would get another lab and do the same. And then when you do a lot of repetition, that you get a good intuition for what's happening, and then you kind of see how stuff like ties together, and it just makes things really easy to talk about when you go to interview. So I would do less certs, and I would put stuff on my resume that was likely to land me jobs, not like CompTIA like Server Plus. I would really laser
Microsoft MCSA.
Yeah, I mean that's it's better than nothing, but there's like just better stuff you can do. So I would focus really hard on what was useful for landing interviews, and then I would be more prepared for when I actually got an interview, which would mean like understanding cybersecurity and risk and those like high level things that allow me to answer interview questions better. So to make things succinct, I would get a solid foundation, maybe like one cert that HR knew about. I would get like maybe one. And then I would get 2 labs, like really robust ones, and do them like many times. So I'm like really smart, for those things, and I can talk. And then make sure, put some really decent projects on my resume, maybe in the form of like some GitHub links or something. And then I would just do really high quality applications, maybe like 5 per day. And I would put more time and energy and focus into it, because
apply to jobs.
Yeah, people. Oh, that's another thing. Like, if you meet everything on the job description, like the requirements, you wouldn't be applying to that job. You'd be applying to something above there. Because like, why are you trying to do like a side grade on purpose, right? So I would be less afraid of, you know, just applying to jobs. Because my first, like, well, granted, I worked in IT. My first cybersecurity job was like a senior title. People are like, oh, you can't do that, but you can. Like if your resume
happens a lot in the real world,
Yes.
not on Reddit, but in the real world actually happens.
Yeah. So apply to jobs, high quality ones, high volume, because people think that you can apply to 20, and if you don't get hired or an interview from them, it means like, oh, I can't get a job. But you need to have more volume, because like as Alex Hormozi says, like volume negates luck, and it does. But you want to amplify your luck by having a high quality resume with like stuff on it. So
honestly, this reminds me of this quotation that said there is someone out there with half of your intelligence making double the amount of money just because they're more brave. They put more themselves out there. Now, there is a statistic that I can't remember exactly what they say. Women are less likely to apply to jobs they're not qualified for. So male candidates, they tend to have more confidence in applying to jobs, even if they don't meet all the criteria, whilst women and even to an extent minorities, they tend to want to meet all the requirements. Take it from me, if you qualify, and people disagree with that, Josh might disagree with that, but if you qualify even for 10% of what the job is asking for, apply, let them reject you if they want to, but don't reject yourself. Apply, put yourself out there. I'm not saying, you know, you qualify for 10%, that's not destiny. Today you qualify for 10%, next week maybe you qualify for 24%, because you're constantly working on your skills. But as you are on that journey of bettering yourself and learning more, put yourself out there, apply to jobs, see what happens.
Yeah, I agree. And that reminds me of something, well, two really important things. I got hired at Microsoft, and a recruiter reached out to me and they gave me the job rec, and I didn't know what literally 90% of it was. I don't know what that is. And I told them I've only worked with this and this and this, but I've done like this and this and this.
You are honest.
Yeah.
Big tick. Yeah.
Do you still want to like interview me? And she was like, oh, let me get back to the hiring manager or whatever. And they interviewed me, and they asked me about what I did do. And then they ended up hiring me. And the job was like $120K, like maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And this is like super important because like no one will, well, not no one, but most people will never match the full job rec. But if you have done like something of like equal or near equal or even more difficult and more volume of stuff, the employer can look at it and they'll be like, wow, this person has been doing like A, B, and C before. They must be able to pick up like X, Y, and Z really, really well. And that's like the what is it? The reality of things.
Yeah.
So like imagine you're like a baker and you're baking like a gourmet cakes for like 10 years or something like this. And then you do an application to like an entry-level pie baker. You've never made a pie before, but like any like sane person would be like, oh, this guy has been making cakes for 10 years. He could probably make a decent pie after like a week of practice, right? And it's the same with cybersecurity. Like if you have a lab where you've done like all these like gymnastics with Azure Sentinel, which is Microsoft's cloud-based SIEM, and you apply to like a security operations job that uses like Splunk, for example, they're not going to be like, oh, this guy's like inexperienced, so we use Splunk, I'm going to filter him out. They're going to look at like all the gymnastics you did with, you know, Sentinel, the other SIEM, and they'll be like, oh, it's like directly applicable. And, you know, he's done a lot or she's done a lot, and you'll be considered for the job. So
now, just to also clarify, some jobs will still reject you. Josh is not saying that you have a guaranteed way of, no, you will still get rejected. It's part of the process, but someone out there, as we said earlier, will give you a chance. We all got a chance. We all got hired that way. Now, if you want to know what I would do differently, honestly, I would personally just go to YouTube, type Unix guy, and just follow the video that says how I would start a cybersecurity career if I was starting over. But in summary, it's essentially what Josh was saying. Build that foundation, and by foundation, I don't mean CompTIA, actual cybersecurity foundation. Then do GRC training, do SOC analyst type training, do labs, apply to jobs, and there is no reason why you can't get to your goal. Now, another thing that I personally said in interviews, and many people have said it after I've recommended that line to them, is when you're asked about something you don't know, do what Josh said, He was honest. He said, look, I don't know this, but I know these other things. A line I like to say is, to display good attitude is to tell the interviewer that, yes, I don't know this, but I'm willing to learn. I'm really passionate about this field, as evidenced by all the studying and labs that I've done. And I'm actually excited to learn about this new topic. And trust me, this will communicate good attitude, openness to learn, and also a love for the field. We don't want people to be crazy about this field, but if you love this field, or if you at least enjoy it to a certain extent, you're more likely to learn and actually have a good time doing the job. So it's not a life sentence.
Yeah.
And on another note, if you're interested in landing your first cybersecurity job in the fastest and cheapest way possible, I recommend you check this video, and I'll see you there.